Right, hopefully we're on. Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very special event, Backstage Pass with Bonhams, an hour of conversation and stories with one of the biggest names of popular music, Harvey Goldsmith. We're just waiting for everybody to log in. I'll just say a few words about the schedule. While people are still logging in. Harvey and I think we'll chat for about 40 minutes or so. And then we'll have time for your questions towards the end. So anything you want to ask Harvey, I'm sure he'll be up for it. You know, if you want to know about Led Zepp's more outrageous backstage antics or Pavarotti's catering demands, get typing. I'll keep an eye on the box there on the right-hand side and get the questions coming in. Let's just see how many people. I think we got everybody there. I think we're probably ready to go. Harvey, can you hear us loud and clear?
I can indeed.
Good. Okay. He probably needs not much of an introduction. He is one of the most important names in music. Harvey Goldsmith is not a singer. He's not a guitarist. He's not a drummer. He is a rock star, I think, who once described his main instrument as the calculator. For nearly 50 years now, Harvey has staged and promoted shows by everybody from the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin via Dylan, Springsteen, Bowie, Pavarotti, a historic collection of guitars and signed posters and memorabilia, mementos belonging to Harvey Goldsmith will be offered by Bonhams Entertainment Memorabilia site in the Knightsbridge sales room on the 5th of May. On the screen now, you can just see some of the items that will be for sale. Probably unprecedented to see an auction of such a comprehensive collection of signatures of some of the biggest names in music, with really impeccable provenance as well. Registrations are now open, and auction catalogues are available to browse online on bonhams.com. Let's start the conversation. Harvey has produced concerts and live shows that have proved to be landmarks of rock history. Music fans are now well used to seeing their heroes perform spectacular shows in arenas and stadiums and in festivals around the world. But they have Harvey Goldsmith to thank, I think, more than anybody in this country, at least. He staged Pink Floyd's huge wall shows. He brought Led Zeppelin back together on stage in 2007, one of the most amazing shows I've ever seen. He famously, of course, with Bob Geldof, was responsible for one of the greatest events in rock and pop history, Live Aid, and then Live 8, which was about, I think, 20 years later. Of course, there has been no live music anywhere for over a year now, so I'd like to hear Harvey's thoughts on the route back to gigs and to festivals, to live music post-COVID. But Harvey, let's start with your roots. Let's go right back to the beginning. I know you first started putting gigs on at university in the student union,
Yeah.
hustling and putting young bands on in the late 60s. Was there a moment early on in your career, a key show maybe, when you thought, wow, this is it. This is what I need to do. This is the life I'm going to live.
I don't think there was a moment. I think I kind of drifted into it. I think what happened was I became social secretary at university. I was studying pharmacy, and the course that I registered for got stopped 6 weeks into the first term, which I was really upset about. And what happened was I was asked if I would do some stuff on for Rag Week, which is the charity collection thing for a week students go mad on, and ended up becoming Rag chairman. And off the back of Rag chairman, I was so angry about the fact that I was going to have to wait another year to redo this course or do an external degree, which I actually didn't want to do, that I reluctantly agreed to do the external London degree, and then thought, I don't know. It was just one of those things. One morning, I stuck my hand up at during a class when they were asking who wants to be the student rep for pharmacy. I stuck my hand up. I go to a plenary session of the student union, and I'm listening to the president talking about the chess club and the bridge club and the football and the cricket and blah, 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 blah. And I said, where's the entertainment?
Right.
And they didn't know who I was. And anyway, I suggested that we should start a club. And the president of the union at the time said, okay, clever Dick, start a club. I said, okay, I'll start a club. And I did. It was called Club 66. It started in January 1966. And by the summer term, I found myself on the finance committee of the university because we were bringing so much money in. And I thought, this is interesting. I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew is I had to make the place. We took over the common room, we turned it into a club, and then we found a building in Brighton itself. But initially, we just thought we've got to create an atmosphere. We changed the lighting. I put sawdust on the floor. I put bowls of nuts on the table with candles. It looked great. Everybody enjoyed it. And somehow or the other, I started to book artists that subsequently became huge. So I realized that I had a good eye for talent. And artists like The Move and The Action,
Wow.
Fleetwood Mac, the Moody Blues, all around at that time, Manfred Mann and so on and so forth.
You put them all on in 66?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And they obviously subsequently became unbelievably popular. And then one day I was doing so well, I befriended a booker at Marquee Artists, the Marquee Club, which was in Soho, which was the doyen of rock clubs at the time, and a very important club. And I befriended the booker there. So he always phoned me up and would tell me about the next act coming up, and I would rely on him and book it. And then I got a phone call from two guys called Terry Ellis and Chris Wright, who'd started a label called Chrysalis. And at the time they were managing two acts, and they phoned me up and said, we've heard all about what you're doing in Brighton and it's all doing well. We've got two acts that we'd love you to put on. One's called Jethro Tull and one's called 10 Years After. And if you would book them, we'll give you a free weekend in London. I said, I live in London. It's the last thing I need. Anyway, we became friends. I'm still very close to Terry.
Wow.
I'm still very friendly with Chris. And
the rest is history.
It goes from there.
Yeah. So the pharmaceuticals industry's loss was rock and roll's gain then, quite clearly.
Yes, I think so.
You would have been running some big pharma company otherwise.
No. The reason I chose this particular course because I was interested in cosmetics and perfumery. I actually wanted to learn and understand the whole aesthetics of perfumery, and I needed to get my degree. I was then planning to spend a year in Grasse in the laboratory and really understand what it was about.
Where the lab was grown.
You have part of your courses. Most medical courses are 4 years, pharmacy is 3 years, but you have to do a year's apprenticeship. I did my year's apprenticeship, and I was first because I wanted to really figure out what it was about. And I was fascinated by men and particularly women coming into the pharmacy and what they were buying. And they were buying a range of cosmetics. Suddenly, Fabergé was flavor of the month, or with the men, it was Brut or something like that. And I started to wonder why everybody's coming in to buy the same piece of cosmetics or the same lipstick or the same aftershave or whatever it was. What is it that they're buying? And I realized it's all about packaging and marketing.
All right.
And that put me in good stead because promoting concert is about packaging and marketing as well. And I remembered that, and I still remember it because marketing is everything.
Yeah. And
it's really, really important. So it wasn't till I eventually got fed up. I got offered a chance to go on an exchange course, which I did in America. I got fed up with the exchange course. I then went to New York. I had an aunt and uncle who lived in New York. I stayed with them for a couple of weeks. I then bought a Greyhound bus ticket, which were for international students, was $99 for 99 days, unlimited travel. And I literally went from one side of America to another. I probably saw more then than I've ever seen since. And stopping off all over the place. And interestingly, I had a real experience in Las Vegas where I was told by the bus driver when I got off the bus, if I went down to the Mint Casino, I could cash my Greyhound bus ticket in, show it to them, and they'll give me $15 worth of chips. It was my lucky day. I played roulette. I ended up winning $350, which in 1967 was quite a lot of money. Checked into Caesar's Palace, had a fabulous time, and then ended up in San Francisco, going downtown, going over Golden Gate Bridge, heard this noise, looked down, saw this crowd of people, checked in at the Y in downtown San Francisco, wormed my way back to Golden Gate Park and saw the Grateful Dead. And I went backstage because I told them I was the biggest promoter in England. Not that anybody knew, but they all loved my accent. So I wormed my way backstage and I met the Grateful Dead. And funny enough, one of the posters in the auction is the Grateful Dead poster for at the Rainbow. They only came to England twice, but they were a most extraordinary band. I befriended them, and there you go. And they did a show at the pyramids in Egypt, which was mind-blowing for that period of time when they did it in the 70s. But I befriended the Grateful Dead and stayed friendly with them all the way through. And every year in the 70s and 80s, they did a week of shows in New York, and they invited me every single year. And I had such a great time with them. The most amazing band. Through that, I saw the scene in San Francisco. I saw what the promoters were doing there. There were two big promoters, one called Bill Graham and one called Chet Helms, who had a family dog. Both of them Chet Helms had the Avalon Ballroom. Bill Graham had Winterland. I saw what they were doing, and I saw, more importantly, that they created these amazing posters to advertise their shows. And I thought, I don't know any of these acts. I've never heard of them. All I know is the artwork is so fascinating. It drew me in to go and see these artists. And at that point, that was my kind of epiphany point. And I thought, I like this business. It sounds like fun. However, I came back to England with two contracts, one to sell family dog posters and one to sell Bill Graham Fillmore posters. I then teamed up with a guy that I met through an ad in the Evening Standard who was looking for a partner for a poster company. And for about a year, I ran a business called Big O Posters. Big O Posters sold and created some of the most iconic posters still today. And interestingly enough, we printed the first 5 editions of Time Out because two of our poster reps, Tony Elliott being one of them, was working for us and actually came up with the idea of Time Out. And we printed it in Kensington High Street, which is very interesting. So and what happened then was we were supporting 2 underground magazines, one called Oz and one called International Times, and they were always short of money. And they knew that I had promoted shows and whatever, and they kept saying to me, "Can you know, we're short of cash. Can you put a show on for us?" And then Oz got busted. Very famous obscenity trial. They were really short of money. They didn't have the money to pay for the barrister to represent them in the trial. And they asked me to put a big fundraising concert, which I did. I did 2. One was called Christmas on Earth, which took place at Olympia with Jimi Hendrix and the Animals. And the other was the 14-hour Technicolor Dream, which again, I wasn't the instigator of them, but I kind of helped co-promote both of them.
Was that at Ali Pali? That was the Pink
And
Floyd
the
show.
14-hour Technicolor Dream was at Ali Pali.
Right.
And there I met the Pink Floyd, the Pretty Things, and, you know, you go through the A to Z, and actually worked. I did a stunt with Yoko Ono. So,
Harvey, no, I'm just going to interrupt because I mean, I asked you a question about a single moment maybe early on, and we've had an amazing kind of 10-15 minute tour through the late 60s underground scene at which you appear at all those really important junctions. And we've got so many stories to get through. Just one of these items that's on sale really, I think, speaks to your huge experience and your influence. It's probably the top of, it's the top lot, I think, probably in the sale, a multi-signed Les Paul, there it is. It's a Gibson Les Paul gold top guitar, signed at Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert. Who are the names? Who are some of the signatures that we can see on there?
the concert took place in 1992 at Madison Square Garden. And what happened was they were organising his 30th anniversary, which was going to be filmed, and it's a DVD, which a video you can buy if you want. And it wasn't going very well. It was all a bit of a mess. And I got a phone call from Bob saying, and I'd met him, and he's not an easy chap to befriend, but some reason or other he liked me. And I got a call saying, would I come over and produce this show, which I did at quite short notice. A lot of the artists had agreed to do it, but it was all over the place. And we came in and we put this show together. The list of people that performed at the show, and most of which are on this, have signed this guitar, is quite extraordinary. And they go from the band to Johnny Cash, June Carter Cash, Roseanne Cash, Tracy Chapman. I'm just reading the list. Eric Clapton, George Harrison, Richie Havens, Chris Christopherson, the OJs, Lou Reed, Stevie Wonder, Neil Young, and onwards. Tom Petty, Sinead O'Connor, and Ronnie Wood, all performed at this concert, most of whom signed this guitar, Willie Nelson, and so on. And it was the most amazing concert. And this was a thank you from all the artists that gave it to me. And it's been languishing in its original case. It's quite a well-known guitar in its own right before the signatures, but it's been languishing in its case in the store ever since. And I kind of half forgot about it till I was moving some stuff around the store and I came across it. And I thought, this is just wasted sitting in its guitar box. And there we go. That's what it is.
Never played it yourself then? Have you ever played any instrument, Harvey?
Only the calculator. Yeah. I fancied myself as a drummer when I was a kid, but that didn't go too far.
There are, I noticed looking through the catalogue, there's quite a few Bruce Springsteen related items. And, you know, I noticed that you promoted the now legendary gigs of what would there have been, 75, I think, in London at Hammersmith Odeon. When and there's a poster related story. I don't think one of the posters is in the sale, but it's sort of rock and roll folklore always says that there were these posters put up around town, you know, saying that the future of rock and roll is about to arrive.
Correct.
Was that you?
Yes, but what happened was I happened to be in New York in 1973, and I'm walking down the road during the afternoon having a wander around. And I bumped into a journalist from Melody Maker called Chris Charlesworth. And I go, hello, Chris, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And we started talking. He said to me, what are you doing tonight? And I said, well, actually, I've got a dinner on later. I said, why? He said, do yourself a favour, go down to the bottom line, forget about the headliner, go and see the opening act. And I'm going, really? He said, this guy is sensational. Go and see the opening act. You will love it. So I thought, hey, it's come from a very famous, you know, even then at the time, journalist in music circles. I better go and do it. So I went down to the bottom line and I watched for, I think, 20 minutes at 7:30, where there were about 25 people in the room, Bruce Springsteen playing, and I was completely blown away. So again, I'm very good at worming my way backstage. It became quite a thing with me. just marching, and particularly in America, because they just love the English accent. So
Right.
they don't know. They
It
go,
opened doors.
who's this guy? I'm the biggest promoter in Europe, blah, 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 blah. I go into Bruce Springsteen's dressing room, I meet them all. And I said to him, you have to come to England and you've got to play in Europe. And he kind of looked at me and he said, Europe, England, he said, this is the first gig I've ever done in New York.
Wow.
He said, I've never played outside my own town other than this.
Yeah, Asbury Park.
Wow, that's fantastic. Anyway, we exchanged notes. I met his tour manager, and who actually subsequently came and worked in my office. I chased them hill and dale for 2 years. And eventually, he just took off like a rocket and became on the front page of Time. Was this headline, is this the future of rock and roll? And it was him. Yeah. And so when I got back to England, by the way, I phoned up the record company, Columbia, to find out who the label manager was for Bruce Springsteen. And the answer I got is, what department does he work in? They'd never heard of him. So anyway, finally we got him to come over and we played at Hammersmith. And then I managed to get, I think, 2 weeks out of him. So we played about 7 or 8 shows in Europe, and then we came back and did another Hammersmith show to finalise it. And at that point, he just took off like a rocket, and everybody loved it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, he still says, I think Springsteen still says, in a weird way, he's bigger in Europe than he is in America.
Yes, I said that as well. I've always said a lot of American artists who come to Europe conquer Europe sometimes before they actually conquer America.
Right.
Stevie Wonder's the same. Michael Jackson's the same. So it's really quite
interesting.
There's
Hendrix, of course, who lived in
London. Jimi Hendrix was relatively unknown in America.
Yeah.
And it's vice versa. Often artists or entertainers from their own hometown often do better outside and then come back to their own city as kind of conquering heroes.
And they're on the screen.
This particular poster is quite, is quite good. And also I have the set list and some notes from Bruce that he just gave me. I did a huge amount of shows with him over the years. And, I predate his manager, who's a very famous guy called John Landau, because when I first started working with Bruce, he had another manager and a whole other setup. But wonderful character.
And that's a reminder, that poster. I mean, Born in the USA tour. I mean, he's really, that's when he just globally
It's the iconic tour that he did, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But you saw him in a little room with 20 people, nobody there. But of course, the scale of rock gigs has changed really because of the way you put on the shows. And Led Zeppelin, I guess, were very important.
Yeah.
A band that helped blow up the scale of the gigs, from the clubs to the arenas to the stadiums. They were pretty notorious as well, hard to handle.
Okay, here's my story on Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin were managed by an infamous, wonderful person called Peter Grant. Peter Grant changed the face of promoting worldwide when him really coming on the scene. He was a wrestler, became a bouncer for another very infamous chap called Don Arden, and most of you know about Sharon Arden, but that's her dad.
Managed the Small Faces.
Yeah. And Peter Grant was quite a tough character, and he changed the way all of the deals were done for promoting worldwide because of the strength of Led Zeppelin. When they first came on the scene, I wasn't working with them. They became very successful in America, were still kind of breaking in England, strangely enough. It's exactly the analogies I said before with Bruce Springsteen, the other way around.
In reverse, yeah.
One day I'm walking, and he shared an office in Oxford Street with another very famous chap called Mickey Most. One day I'm walking along Oxford Street, I walk past Mickey Most's office, and out bounces Peter Grant. And he looks at me and I go, "Oh, hello, Peter." how are you? And he said, I'm not talking to you. And I go, what's the matter? He said, what do I have to do to get hold of you? I said, what do you mean? Apparently, he'd been ringing me for, this is the biggest act in the world, for 3 months. And because he had this kind of gruff voice, and actually was a patsy really, but he had this gruff voice, and he annoyed my receptionist in the office. She would never put him through because she thought he was some kind of villain. She didn't know who he was. And he told me this story that he kept ringing and ringing and ringing.
Oh my God.
And could never get through. And I said, oh, I mean, I was so taken aback. I didn't know what to say. And he said, well, forget about working with us. So I went back to the office and I thought, I don't know what to say to the receptionist. The biggest act in the world, manager's calling me to promote shows with the artist. And she won't even put him through to me. It was hysterical. Anyway, I wrote him a note. I went round and I phoned Mickey Bostock, who I was quite friendly with. I said, Mickey, you've got to talk to Peter. There's been a dreadful mistake, whatever. And we were all laughing about it. And Peter, who had a very, very sly sense of humour, was laughing as well. And eventually, very soon thereafter, I started working with Led Zeppelin. And then the poster that's on sale is the very last tour that the band with John Bonham in it presented. We did it all over Europe. This one that's on the screen now is the reunion concert that I did in 2007. And that simply came about because I had 2 mentors in America. One was a chap called Frank Barcelona, who ran an agency called Premier Talent, because he handled all the English acts in America. And really, he built the whole music scene in America. He divided America into every state and had a promoter in each state, which still happens today, actually. And the other was a chap called Ahmet Ertegun, who was the president of Atlantic Records. And Ahmet was probably the most important man in the whole of the record industry. And he and I became great and dear friends. And when he died, I went to his memorial service, and his wife came up to me and she said, the one thing that Ahmet would have loved was if you would produce a concert for him, not in America, but in England, with all the great English acts that he had signed. And here it is. So after the memorial, there was a lunch at the Tavern on the Green in Central Park. And I'm sitting next to Eric Clapton and Robbie Robertson and Robert Plant, and Jimmy Page, and a few others. And we started talking about this. And I said that Mika, Ahmet's wife, had asked me to put a concert together. And Eric suddenly piped up and said, oh, I'll put Cream together. And then I think Mike Rutherford was there. He said, well, I'll talk to the others and maybe we'll get Genesis together. So the original idea for this concert was to get half a dozen acts, each doing 30 minutes. And then we looked at it, and I was working with the Who's manager on this, who was also quite close to Ahmet, and a chap called Phil Carson, who worked for Ahmet at Atlantic Records. And the 3 of us were trying to put this thing together. And we suddenly figured out we'd have to do 2 days. But no answer from Led Zeppelin or any of the members thereof. And we couldn't get anywhere with them. So I wrote each of them a personal note. And I basically said, please come together, play for 30 minutes. Don't do it for me. Forget about touring, making a new album or whatever. Just do this for Ahmet, because Ahmet was their mentor in America too.
Yeah.
They all met, talked about it. 2 days later, I got a phone call from Jimmy Page. He said, we're going to have a meeting. And what I didn't realize was they'd got together. They hadn't talked to each other, let alone played with each other for donkey's years. They decided to go into a secret rehearsal room somewhere down in the country to see if they could actually play. They came back 2 weeks later and said, we'd like to meet. So I went over with their representatives. We all met in the room at their accountant's office, and Jimmy Page walked in and said, we thought about it and we talked about it and we're going to do it. And I went, oh, how fantastic. And they said, but only on one condition. We want to play a whole concert. And I just kind of looked at them. I said, yes.
Yes.
And then, of course, we then had to dump all the rest of the ideas.
Right.
And what we did, if you look down the list on this poster, we got a lot of artists to play the first half of the show,
As the support act.
and some of them in combinations and together,
Yeah.
to really represent some of the acts that Armin had signed. And then Led Zeppelin did a complete show.
So,
It was the most extraordinary experience of my life. 253 million people tried to log on to a website we created for this concert.
wow.
And there were 26 million applications for tickets. And we had 18,000 tickets to sell.
Wow.
I knew the names of every single person. I was so paranoid about the pirates and the touts getting the tickets that I really put everybody through the hoop to get in, which I think they respected me for afterwards. But it was the most amazing concert, and this is the celebration of it.
Yeah, I was there, Harvey. It was an amazing, amazing evening. I don't think anybody, and I know there are a lot of old Led Zepp heads in there, and as soon as they started and went in with whatever it was, Dazed and Confused, I think possibly.
Yeah.
The people were in tears. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
a lot of, you know, mature men absolutely weeping. Yeah, and quite an amazing thing. You work with The Who as well. I mean, another handful, but I know one of your favourite bands. Of course, The Who and Led Zepp, both on the Live Aid bills in 1985 on different sides of the Atlantic.
Yes.
And you also had Bowie, of course. You had Dylan. You had Paul McCartney. You had everybody. Was that the hardest thing you've ever had to organise?
Yes, I guess so. It was, the whole Live Aid experience happened in 10 and a half weeks. I was actually looking after Roger Waters, and I was also working very closely with Wham, with George Michael. George Michael's manager phoned me up one day and said, Wham are going to go, I've arranged for Wham to play China. And I went, really? And he said, yes. He said, the problem is I can't go to China, but you'll have to take them there. And we're going to do 2 concerts in Hong Kong, and then we're going to China. Meet us in Hong Kong 2 days before for the rehearsal, and we'll discuss it, and you'll have to take them to China. Like, okay, there you go. Put the phone down. And I said, well, I'm on my way to New York with Roger Waters doing his first solo album called The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. And we're going to launch at Radio City in New York. And, you know, I've got to concentrate on that. And he's going, no, you go straight from New York to Tokyo, via Tokyo, as it transpires, the only way I could get there, to Hong Kong, which was a hellish journey. Arrive in Hong Kong, and these 2 concerts, so we ended up taking Wham to China. And in the middle of all this, Bob Geldof is calling saying, you know, all about the record that we did, Do You Know It's Christmas? As much as it was a huge success, it's not enough. I've been to Africa and I realized that we've only tipped the iceberg. We need to do a concert. And I'm going, I can't do this. I'm going to New York, and then I'm going to China, literally to the unknown. I can't deal with this. As much as I understand what you want to do, I can't deal with this till I get back. The day I arrived back in England, the next morning I went into the office and Bob was waiting there for me. And we discussed it. And I at the time, I'd seen the pictures, as everybody else had, which Michael Burke did, of this horror story of what was going on in Africa, where the big debate of the day in Europe was, what do we do about fruit mountains and butter mountains and all the surplus? And there down the road are people that are literally starving. So I was fully aware of it, but I couldn't, my head was full of New York and China, and China was an experience that really, I had no idea what was going to happen. I'd had a previous experience because I took Elton John to Russia in 1978, but this was something else. First Western pop band ever to go to China, just delving into the unknown. Anyway, I came back, we got together, and we just literally started working on it, and we didn't stop till it was over. And there's this famous moment, or infamous moment, at the end of Live Aid. Bob and I are sitting on the drum riser, looking at this sea of emptiness and rubbish, and people helping to pick the rubbish up in Wembley Stadium. He just looked at me and said, "Is that it?" That was it. It was a whirlwind.
Amazing.
But it was extraordinary.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking earlier about how that was put on, that show, bringing together all of those acts from around the world without the internet, without mobile phones, without technology. I mean, everything done on landlines, I guess, and fax machines.
We had no fax machines.
No
fax machines, no, had only just been invented.
Wow.
Were just being talked about. They weren't really on the market. We ran the whole operation on landlines, telex machine, which was, for those that don't know, was a tape, a ticker tape that went in a machine and translated itself, and a pair of calipers to work out where the satellite was going to be, and a ruler and pencil, things that nobody even knows what they are anymore. That's what we did it on. It was extraordinary, really. At the time, we didn't have time to think. We just had to get on with it. The irony, of course, was when we had the press conference to announce the show at Wembley Stadium in the banqueting hall, I think there was the largest collection of press, TV and radio people I'd ever seen in my life. Over 400 people turned up from all over the world. The only act that had actually confirmed at the point of the press conference was the Boomtown Rats. And Bob, we were sitting at this table, and Bob suddenly got up and just rattled off a list of acts. And I am literally kicking his shins under the table, saying, "For God's sake, shut up." Not one single act that he mentioned half of them hadn't even been asked. That's how it was.
He basically press-ganged them into action.
Press-ganged them in. And then, of course, he went the other way. Once the momentum flowed, everybody wanted to do it. Yeah. But it was extraordinary.
I'm just aware that we've got about 20 minutes, and just a reminder to anybody that is following this, there is a little chat room. If you want to throw some questions at Harvey, I can pass those questions on. We'll talk for a bit more. I think what's really important, Harvey, given that you have been in this business now for over 40 years, nearly 50 years, on putting shows on at that level, changing the game. Did you, in that time, or in more recent years, did you ever do a worst case scenario planning for a pandemic? Could you ever have foreseen the situation we're in now?
No, nobody could. We lived through BSE, we lived through SARS. That was an interesting experience because I was on the board of the London Tourist Board, and we transitioned when the Mayor of London came into play. We transitioned over to Visit London, and at that point in time, strangely enough, there was no government structure for dealing with an outbreak. And when the BSE thing happened, nobody knew what to do. So what happened was there were chief constables up north saying one thing. There were chief constables in London saying something completely different. There were ministers, all of whom were disconnected, all saying all different things. And so we wrote a paper for the mayor to present to government, which is now in place today, of a structure of how to deal with it. It's quite extraordinary, really. That happened. There were 8 of us on this committee that was transitioning through to create this office for the mayor for tourism in London. And there was no provision for it. It's just as confusing today, I might add, with all the things that they know. We still don't know when we can actually get back to work. We don't know when concerts will really start. There's a lot of tickets being sold on the hope that shows will take place this summer. I'm a little bit more sceptical because we don't know what the rules and regs are, what the protocols are going to be as yet. They're testing things out at the moment. We have a major issue because we have no insurance, and the insurance market has kind of run a mile from its obligations to to do COVID cover. They're not doing it. And we also have the issue of Europe for artists that tour right across Europe, in that we have issues with visas with all the different countries, and we have an issue with trucking where you can't do more than 2 stops on a trucking, and we're doing probably 30 or 40 stops on trucking. So all those issues have got to be hammered out before we can actually get back to work. And I'm fearful that it's going to be at best very late in August before the first shows could take place, and probably September if we're lucky.
So you haven't got anything planned? There's nothing in the diary?
I've cancelled everything. My first shows at the moment are in September indoors, and I'm praying that they take place, because I'm not sure that they will happen either. And I know in Ireland, for example, they believe that they won't open till 22 with anything in entertainment. So it's still not clear what's really happening, and it's a bit disconcerting, to be honest.
And it's not just about the pandemic, is it? I mean, because COVID has masked a lot of the problems that live performance and the touring sector have been warning about.
Yes.
Regarding the problems of getting visas, work permits, carnets for instruments because of the new trade deal.
Yes.
So that's a huge problem, because none of those are resolved at the moment, are they?
No. Quite frankly, the European issues can be solved over lunch. And I mean that sincerely, because the Europeans want free passage for their artists and sports people. We want free passage for our artists and sports people. What's the problem? The trucking issue that we're caught with was to stop Russian truckers from dumping stuff in Europe. Nothing to do with us whatsoever. We just got caught in on it. It's called cabotage. And it's a joke. And, 30-minute discussion could sort that out. There has to be willingness on both sides. Hopefully, things are now settling down a little bit between ourselves and Europe, and they'll get round to dealing with it. But they have to deal with it. Otherwise, none of us, whether it's symphony orchestras, ballet companies, theatre companies, or artists at this moment in time, can easily tour Europe and the UK at the same, as part of a run.
And if you overcome those issues, Harvey, can live music recover and continue, or will it change long term, do you think?
I hope it changes, because it's constantly evolving. I really do hope there will be changes. I'm not seeing much sign of it. The only thing I do know is there's been a lot of research by the ticketing companies, by some of the bigger promoters, and all that research shows that there is a huge thirst to go back to entertainment, whether it's theatre, whether it's musicals, whether it's live concerts or whatever. There's a huge interest in it. When the Prime Minister announced that life, if everything goes well, life would start again on June the 21st or 24th or whatever it was, the weekend of the announcement, over 100,000 tickets were sold for shows. That's fantastic. And I just want to make sure that we can provide a safe environment for people to go back and really enjoy themselves. And I also hope that the music starts to evolve and change, as it will naturally, and we just get some new ideas, because we need them.
Okay, let's get some questions from the people who are watching this. I'm just looking down the list of questions. The one from Martin Kemp here. Now, it's either the Renaissance scholar, Dr. Martin Kemp, or possibly it's the bass player and actor Martin Kemp. He says, how many decades will the Stones be touring? Are they like Captain Scarlet, indestructible? There's the clue in the question, isn't there? The word indestructible.
They do seem to be indestructible. I think they're going to go out again at least one more time, and you never know your luck, because the artists don't know any different. That's what they do. They make records and they play live. They don't know anything else. So they've got no interest in stopping. So they'll play till they drop, I think.
Right. The response to that, of course, is when a Spandau Ballet back on tour, Martin Kemp. I'm not sure if you can answer in this chat room. Let's do the one above that. This is anonymous attendee. I don't know who this is, but he says, what was it like working with David Bowie and seeing the different persona? That's an interesting point, actually, isn't it? With the Stones, you kind of know what you're going to get tour after tour. They shake up the set list. But with Bowie, I guess it was a really different show every time.
Absolutely. You never knew what a chameleon David was. I loved him. He was such a fabulous performer, artist, and as a person, I got on really well with him. We would spend a lot of time talking to each other, even when we weren't touring. You never knew when he was going to perform and when he wasn't going to perform. I remember once doing an article for the Daily Telegraph, and they said, can you tell us when David Bowie's going out on the road again? I said, no, I can't. But and they said, well, what prompts him to do it? I said, he's got an alarm clock inside his body. And when the alarm goes off, he knows it's time to tour. And I can't tell you when that'll be. But whatever it will be fabulous. And so it was. And throughout his whole life, he was constantly evolving, constantly changing, most extraordinary, lovable, likable, beautiful character. And I have this poster, which is one of my favorites, and unfortunately it's been languishing in a store, but I hope that finds a really great home because it just shows the character of him. He was a wonderful person.
Another question here, another anonymous one. It says, of all the technological advances since 1966, what had the biggest impact on your shows? Screens, sound system, or something else?
Technology has advanced hugely. When, in the early days, speakers were huge, and they've now got smaller and smaller and better. I remember that one of the big speaker manufacturers created something called a Reading horn for long throw for outdoor festivals, and this Reading horn was about 4 foot long and about 2 foot high. I mean, it was enormous. It took a crane to lift it up and place it in place. Now the same thing is a speaker is about that size.
Right.
So the quality of sound, the understanding of sound, how to deal with delays in sound now are much better. And the same with lighting. Lighting, par cans in lighting were huge, like searchlights at one point. Today, there are screen technology, matrix technology. There are opportunities in lighting where you can get tiny lights that you can literally hide on your body. You can have cameras on the end of the guitar. You can do so much more in production that makes a show really interesting, clever and smart. One of the things that have come out as a result of COVID is virtual reality concerts, which a lot of work is being done on at the moment, where you'll be able to put on a pair of goggles and actually watch a concert live taking place maybe in a club in Los Angeles or maybe in Tokyo, and actually watch it live. And 360-degree vision. You can see, if you look online, you can see some shows where you can actually, as you turn your phone around, you can actually turn around and see 360 vision. All this kind of technology is constantly improving the experience, both live and visually, for artists to perform.
A question that's just popped up. Somebody else, anonymous, says, were you really there when Keith Moon threw a TV out of the window?
Yes.
Where was that? One of many TVs he threw out of windows, I bet.
He didn't do it once, he did it more than once.
Yeah.
We were in Leicester in the Post House, and I remember going on, I got very friendly with Keith. It was a bit sad because towards the end of his life, he suddenly realized that he was having to perform every night. And when I say perform, not playing drums, but perform as a buffoon. And he was getting a bit fed up with it, but he didn't know what else to do. We were in Leicester, we were on tour with The Who, we played in Leicester. And when they come off stage, that band, who are probably still, even today, the most exciting rock and roll band of all time and forever, they get very pumped up. So by the time they get back, they used to smash their dressing rooms up, but then they realized if they kept smashing the dressing rooms up, they weren't going to have any gigs to play in. And then they went to hotels and so on and so forth. And I think what happened with Keith was he got back to his hotel. He was really pumped up, been a great show, blah, 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 blah. Turned on the television, and it was the early days of remote controls. And the remote control, the battery was flat. So he couldn't change channels, he couldn't do anything. He got so exasperated, he literally picked the television up, chucked it out the window, and it lit. And fortunately for everybody, it landed in the swimming pool. And of course, there was no one in there because it was 12 o'clock. That was Keith Moon. He did blow the toilet up in, which I wasn't at, but in Australia with 2 sticks of dynamite. He was a wonderful. I mean, stories abound with Keith. He was a wonderful character.
Yeah.
But to this day, the Who are still one of the most exciting bands to watch and to listen to.
One of your favourites. I mean, actually, there's a question here. Let me just try and find that question that I saw, which relates to that, actually. Oh, Laurel Kemp, probably related to Martin. What kind of music does Harvey listen to in his free time? Is it artists that he represents, or does he prefer listening to up-and-comers?
I have a pretty broad church of musical taste. I love jazz as much as I love opera. And I spent 26 years working with Pavarotti, which really was another experience, a really extraordinary experience. And I count myself very lucky to have befriended him and ended up managing him. But my musical tastes are more Miles Davis and John Coltrane, which is what I listen to at home.
That's good to hear.
And I had the privilege, I was very lucky to be able to tour Miles Davis as well. Which
did you? You worked with him?
Yeah, which was quite an experience too.
Yeah, he must have been a handful, I guess.
A little bit.
Yeah.
He tried to kill me one night.
You're not joking either, are you? Let's just see if there's any more. What have we got? We've got 5 minutes to say. Let's see if there's other questions. I mean, talk about the rock and roll bad behavior, or the jazz man's bad behavior in Miles's case. Here's a question. Do you think the use of drugs in the music business is as prolific as it was in the 70s and 80s? And I mean, was that, you must have seen some some scandalous things going on backstage in your time. It must have been pretty prevalent.
It was very prevalent, yes. If you ask a lot of the biggest acts in the world today and talk about famous shows that people refer to, whether it's Woodstock or the Isle of Wight or whatever, most of them won't remember at all. And, people wax lyrical about certain tours, or when Eric Clapton played the Royal Albert Hall or the Rainbow or whatever. They have no idea what you're talking about because they didn't remember it. Then what happened, within the last 20 years, acts started to get healthy. So instead of having their bag man come backstage with a plethora of drugs, they now have their physical guy come backstage with a plethora of exercises. It's completely changed, and they're out running, and they're this and they're that, and they're doing exercises before they go on stage and so on. So it is quite a change. Look, there's still drugs around. There'll always be drugs around, unfortunately. I think with some genres of music it's more prevalent than in others. But strangely enough, artists today have got a lot more sensible. They went through that period obviously in the 60s, the 70s and the 80s, and drugs changed during that period. But I think today artists are much more canny. The one thing that artists know that perform live is, one, they can't be late. They have to turn up on the day at the right place. And I've got lots of experiences of bands and artists turning up the wrong city on the wrong night, or me turning up the wrong city on the wrong night and then being there waiting for me, which has happened a few times. But I think today most artists are more sensible because the big issue today is money, and money drives everything. And to some extent, we've lost a bit of our creativity, but nevertheless, I'm sure that will come back. And I hope what will happen in this languished period of time when artists have not been able to work live, they're all been thinking about what they're going to do. A new breed of artists will come on board, of new superheroes, with a different way of doing it. And our business constantly evolves.
That's great. Great that you're still looking forward and thinking about the way that the business will evolve. I'm just going to finish off just with the last question that's just popped up. This is a good one, actually. Who was the one artist or band that couldn't play Live Aid that you wanted on the bill?
Well, we wanted Michael Jackson to play, and he didn't play. We wanted Stevie Wonder to play, and he didn't play. I suppose those were the two key acts that we would have loved to have had play with us, but they didn't.
I'm just going to throw one back in here, Harvey, just before we wrap up, because you must have seen, I mean, God knows how many shows over the years. Have you got any idea how many concerts that you have put on and therefore witnessed in your time?
About 10,000.
And is it possible to name the greatest of all of those?
Well, there's greatest of difference. I mean, just talking about Live Aid again, and again, one of the greatest show bands of all time was Queen, and they still are today. Queen today, even without Freddie, are as popular today as they were ever. And of course, at Live Aid, even though Freddie was ill at the time, their performance was so outstanding. It just blew everybody away, how good they were. And how understanding Freddie had of an audience. I love working with Queen. They were extraordinary characters, and I was really I felt quite privileged to be able to produce that tribute to Freddie Mercury, which again is one of the posters in the auction, because it was a privilege to do that. It was a privilege working with them. They were smashing people. They are still today. And they were quite extraordinary. For me, the best musical outdoor concert I think I'd ever produced was Bob Dylan and Eric Clapton at Blackbush, because musically it was mind-blowing. It was also one of the biggest audience ever. It was 176,000 people.
Wow.
At Blackbush Aerodrome, with a really fantastic bill of artists. But Bob Dylan and Eric Clapton playing together, and Bob Dylan was at his height with one of the best bands he ever had, and we did a tour around Europe. But musically, Blackbush was quite extraordinary. The Led Zeppelin concert, the reunion concert, was remarkable of how well they played and how good they really were. Because I remember the night before talking to them in this massive, great rehearsal studio, which was one of the film studios at Shepperton. There were four of us watching it. It was in a closed set, and their road crew and the band, and the hairs at the back of my head just stood up, whatever I had left, because I just couldn't believe the emotion of how well they were playing. So different acts for different horses for different courses. Bruce Springsteen for excitement and energy. The Who, the most spectacular rock band of all time. The Rolling Stones for the best spectacle, because they always delivered and put on, and still to this day, the most amazing concerts. So you remember them for the staging and the spectacle as well as their performance, and on you go.
And rock fans have you to thank for so many of those shows that they've loved over the years. Just a reminder that the Bonhams Entertainment Memorabilia auction is taking place in the Bonhams Knightsbridge sales room in London on the 5th of May, 11 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, this Sunday and next Tuesday, you can go and see everything that will be sold. You can go in real life, not just online. You can walk around the gallery there and see some of these remarkable items. The catalogue is also available. It's on Bonham's website, which is just bonhams.com, and via the Bonhams app. That's about it. Thank you all very much indeed. Sorry we haven't got time for any more questions. It's just been an absolute pleasure talking to Harvey Goldsmith. Harvey, thanks so much indeed for that.
My pleasure. And I hope those people that end up with some of the memorabilia really enjoyed them as I did putting those shows on and meeting those artists.
Well, they are wonderful reminders of those shows. I'm sure it's going to be in huge demand. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been great. So many stories, so many more. I'm sure we could have had, but we just got a flavour of the man who is responsible. What 10,000 shows? That's incredible. Harvey, thanks very much indeed. Good to see you again.
Thank you indeed. Thank you.
Cheers then. Bye.